Hi, I'm Mimi Chan. Welcome to Culture Chat. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to 2018. I am so honored to be able to come back and host Culture Chat and be here podcasting. It has been a really great privilege and I'm excited. I'm excited to talk to you guys today about New Year's resolutions. We are all really guilty of kind of setting New Year's resolutions and then not keeping them. And so I am joined with my very favorite guest of all time. With no bias at all, my husband, Oscar Agramonte, who is a personal trainer and strength and conditioning specialist at Control Your Health. And so full-time, he dedicates his time to basically helping others achieve their goals. And I wanted to talk to him and get some expert advice, not just for me, but also for you, our listeners, on kind of how we can maybe reshape and rethink the way we think of New Year's resolutions. Because my understanding that is it's probably the most popular time that everyone makes a New Year's resolution. And it is probably, I think the statistic is something like after the first week alone, there's like a 22% failure. And then after the first month, a 40% failure. And then after a few months, you're already over 50%. So it just keeps going downhill from there. So first of all, welcome, Oscar.
Thank you, Mimi. And I also would like to say that this is my favorite podcast. And as you know, I listen to a lot of podcasts, no bias, number one with a bullet, Culture Chat with Mimi Chan, best podcast. And I'm honored to be on it, especially after all of the kind of, more well-known people that you've had on. I'm honored that you would decide to have me on. Pretty exciting.
No bias there either. All right. So, but I wanted to kind of talk to you because you are my go-to. And, even in our daily lives, we work at the Kung Fu School, at the Wallam Temple. You have your gym, your studio at Control Your Health and Wallam Fit. And everybody kind of does do that. They kind of go to you with their questions. So I figure, why not have you on and let's actually tackle one of the biggest one. It's like, how can we stick to our New Year's resolutions? How idealistic is it? Is it kind of a false thing? Or, should we even make New Year's resolutions? I guess it's kind of different for everyone. But since most New Year's resolutions kind of revolve around health and fitness, I kind of wanted to specialize and kind of focus in on that today. So talking about goals and health and fitness goals, what would you say to people who do set New Year's resolutions? Like, do you think it's a good idea?
Sure. I mean, we're in 2018, right? Which is wild to think that. But at the beginning of every year, it's nice, and maybe there's something in all of us that just makes us think, you know what, New Year, it's time to hit the reset button. I personally do that almost on a daily, weekly, monthly, and then of course a yearly basis. So to give you just a quick example, and this is why I can't say that it's not a good thing to make New Year's resolutions, is every morning I wake up and I say, you know what? Today I'm going to try to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. And then on Sunday nights, I do kind of a weekly review and I start saying, okay, you know what? On Monday, I'm going to try to be a little bit better than what I did last week. And the same thing each month, quarterly, yearly. So I don't think it's a negative thing to make New Year's resolutions. The only negative part that I would have with that is when people start going into, let's say it was September or October, or at any point, and they see the new year coming on, and they just hit pause on all of their potential goals and say, you know what, I'm just going to wait till January. Because that is a habit that then carries over to everything, right? Like on a day-to-day basis, you could say, you know what, I'm just going to wait till tomorrow to do that, or I'm going to wait till next week or next month. And that's something, to give you some props, is something that you don't do. If you say you're going to do something, you just do it. Like, hey, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm thinking I might do a podcast. And then a week later, you've got 3 podcasts recorded. And now I don't know what number we're on, but it's been a year, right? So a habit that you don't want to get into is hitting this pause button and waiting for the perfect time. But we're here. We're in January, so we might as well tackle what most people are doing, right? Which is, okay, now it's a new year and I can hit the reset button.
Yeah, so what I'm doing right now is writing down a note for myself in October, maybe before Halloween. We have another podcast to kind of remind our listeners, hey, just because the holidays are coming, don't throw everything out the window. Don't let it all go down the drain. I'm with you on that. It's really easy to get into the rut of, well, everything's already going so badly. I've already gained 10 more pounds, or I've already lost, all my, if I could do 50 push-ups, I can't do it anymore. So why bother? I think it's just kind of that daily challenge of getting up and making the small strides. The problem is, and I mean, I'm admittedly at fault here too, seeing the small strides isn't enough. Like, learning to recognize maybe those small wins. So let's get really specific. Let's, for our listeners' sake anyway, let's say that I want to lose 5 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever the number may be. Let's say 5, just to make it a very specific, so our listeners can say, okay, that's me. I'm in that. So you listeners, you can just plug in whatever number you're comfortable with, right? But say I come to you and I say, all right, it's 2018. I have a goal. I've got my 22nd graduation, what is it, 22nd class reunion coming up, which, Oscar and I actually did graduate together, and we would never go to any of those reunions. We're a little antisocial that way, but let's say...
We're too cool for that, to go back to a high school reunion.
We're not going, never go back.
Plus, the only people that I'm in contact with that I graduated with, one I married, and the other one I'm related to, who's my brother. Those are my main 2 people that I keep in contact that I graduated with. So that's just my thing.
Right, so we're good. We could have our own reunion.
We could have our mini reunion every holiday.
Okay, so let's just say, all right, I have this goal, the reunion's in 6 months. I have to lose this weight, because not just for the reunion, but also the last 5 years, ever since blah, 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 I haven't been able to get the weight off. What would you tell me? I mean, here I am coming to you, cliche New Year's resolution candidate, but what do you say?
So, well, my first thing is to just reaffirm and say, hey, just so that I'm clear, what I'm understanding is that you want to lose 5 pounds, or insert whatever the number is for the potential client. But then what does that mean, right? Because 5 pounds is just or any pound is just an arbitrary number. It doesn't really have that much meaning. And this isn't about you, but for whoever is saying that, what it means is, if I lose this 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20, whatever it is, that means that I'll be able to what? And for some people, some of my clients, it's, I'll be able to fit back into this dress that I know. Or it may be, I'll be able to move better, right? As a Kung Fu, as a martial artist, that maybe 5 pounds can make a difference between moving really well and not moving as well when you're at a certain level. So the number, if most people come with that, I want to lose this weight, but that's not the real reason. There's something else behind that. So we kind of have to tap into that first. And let's just use the example of you as a martial artist. Well, what it means is that you're going to move better, right? And that you're going to be able to perform your Kung Fu more fluidly. And so really then to dig deeper is, maybe it's not necessarily the 5 pounds. Maybe it could be getting a little bit leaner or stronger, or dialing into the nutrition. So everyone is different, right? And every case is going to be have its own unique challenges. But the first step is to dig a little bit deeper, and you don't need me as a coach to do that. You can do a real simple exercise, which I learned from Precision Nutrition, called the 5 whys, right? So let's just say that you said, I want to lose 5 pounds. But my next question was, well, why is that important to you? And you may say, well, because I know that I'll feel better. And why do you want to feel better by 5 pounds? And we just keep going. And eventually you're going to dig and find out the real reason why you have this goal. And that's what's going to keep you motivated to, committing to certain actions on a daily basis for the long term.
Okay, there's 2 things I want to address there. One is, it does seem like there's a lot of psychology that kind of goes into this. And the first layer of it is that, do you find that people who say, okay, I have 5 pounds, their goal actually changes, or maybe what you just said, like you go 5 layers deep and their real goal isn't necessarily the 5 pounds, it's whatever after the 5 whys. But do you find that that changes once they maybe even reach that goal, or, you know, maybe it wasn't the 5 pounds, they did lose 5, but they're still not satisfied? Or do you find like they don't lose the 5, but they've gained strength and that makes them feel better? Do you find that that is usually the case, or do you feel people really just like stick to their, this is my number, this is what I've kind of wanted, and then kind of, you know, meet from there?
If it was Mimi Chan, it would be whatever she said at the beginning. This is what I wanted, and I know what I want. I'm a very self-aware person. No, but I would say the majority of people, it would change. Which, to give you an example of, there's a client that I know that I trained, and she had a specific goal of a number. I want to get to this weight, and we don't need to go into what the exact numbers are. But after training for almost a year and feeling a ton better, stronger, moving better, not being in pain, but not really close to that number of weight, then her goal changed to maybe a more realistic scale weight. And she realized, you know what, I am getting stronger, so the scale isn't that, to get to this specific number is not that big of a deal. Now, that's not to say that you get on the scale and you still don't want to see a certain number, but that specific goal of 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, whatever the number is, that can absolutely change. And it can change. It really just depends on the person. So does that answer the question?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about weight, because that's really kind of stuck in a lot of people's heads. You know, they get on the scale, or they're afraid to get on the scale. I mean, I admittedly don't think the scale is my best friend either. I feel like sometimes I'm yelling that it's a liar. But is weight really that important? I mean, we hear, oh, this scale tells you your body fat and your BMI and your this and your water weight and your how much you're retaining, and then you get all this information, and listeners love to just look everything up on the internet and just kind of get bombarded with info. Like, what's the straight, fast, like, obviously if you're obese or you have a huge amount over what an average weight is, but is weight always really the number we should be looking at?
Yeah, so you hit it right on the head, which is, you know, if you're like 300 pounds, then...
And 5'7".
Yeah, and not even that. I mean, if there's a certain weight, and I don't have the numbers on Todd, but let's just say it's that arbitrary number of 300 pounds, then you have a much higher likelihood percentage of dying at a younger age, right? Because it's just hard to live at that weight. So for someone like that, maybe the scale weight is going to be a big thing. But for the majority of people, for a big portion, the number on the scale is not going to matter as much as being able to make sure that you're moving well, that you're feeling better, that your mindset and your mental state is healthier, that you've got relationships that are strong and beneficial to you. But we're all stuck with that scale weight because that's, I think, just how we've been trained, right? To just hop on the scale, look at it, and then think.
And judge.
This is the number. Yeah, well, right. Hop on the whale, judge, look at yourself in the mirror, hate yourself, hop off, slam the scale, and then go eat the ice cream, get on Amazon, order another scale, and then the cycle just repeats itself. No, but the scale is not as important. In my opinion, I think if you're the type of person who needs to get on the scale every day and get concerned over 1 or 2 pound or fluctuations, minimal pound fluctuations, then the scale is probably not the right thing for you, because it's just going to lead to more mental stress. If you're maybe an athlete who has to be at a certain weight, or you really have always been within a certain weight, and then you start noticing over time, wow, I've creeped up 5, 10 pounds, then that's something that maybe you can look at, because you can know, hey, my baseline is within 5, 6 pounds. Like, that's how I am. I don't hop on the scale all the time, but after, our long trip and eating and traveling, I get on the scale and I was like, oh, you know what? It's where my average is, or, okay, it's not where I'm normally need to be. We need to tweak a few things.
Right. So you just hit on something that I think listeners really need to look at there. Instead of looking at a certain number, having that baseline of what's reasonable, because we do. I mean, especially women, we retain water. Things change with our bodies all the time. And so, what do you think is a good baseline? Like, is between 5 pounds for men, or is there an average or something, or is it really just to a person?
I think each person is different. So I'll tell you what I do with my clients. Every couple of weeks, we take a few measurements. We take their scale weight. We take their waistline from the largest area. So for most people, that's going to be the belly button. It's just an easy target that everyone knows. But some people maybe a couple of inches right below the belly button. That's the biggest circumference of their waist. And then a third thing. Because these are all things that you can do on your own, is to find maybe a shirt or a pair of pants that fits you when you're at your right weight, and have that as your baseline, right? So you can do whichever one works for you. But I do that with my clients, and then we can see, hey, you know what? Things are kind of, as far as how things are fitting, they're kind of staying the same, or they're going down, or they're up. The scale, if you've got the right mindset, again, is a good barometer of looking at trends, but I wouldn't hop on it on a daily basis. I would say every 2 weeks or even every month, you can hop on the scale and say, this is kind of where I am comfortable at.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
And the same with the waist, right? If you can say, man, these pants are a little bit tight on me, maybe they got put in the dryer, or or you could just measure your waist, right? Once a month or once every couple of months and see, oh, it's going up or down. Right, but it's just not healthy, in my opinion, to do it on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that leads to a little bit of obsession and over-obsessing over something, and I actually want to tap into that now. I talked a little bit earlier with you about kind of the psychology of things. Like, obviously, you're asking 5 whys. You keep delving deeper into understanding, and I think a big part of it that a lot of people get caught up on is the fad diet and crash diet, and okay, well, I'm not eating carbs anymore, I'm not eating this or that, and or totally giving up meat or whatever it is. And I get that everyone has a different nutrition, and we're certainly not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't eat, and because obviously you gotta eat and be happy. But I think there's 3 things like we can tackle, like that nutrition, obviously what's good for you, the fitness part of it, moving and the actual exercise. And then I think something that people neglect and don't realize, maybe it's the most important out of all 3, and I'm asking you from your professional opinion, is that whole mindset of that stress maintenance, which I consider under the umbrella of, sleep, stress level, and kind of that where your mind is, like that mindfulness or that rested state, or being able to turn the brain off. I guess I kind of consider that all under one umbrella. Maybe you have a better terminology.
No, well, you know what? I think the way you want to approach it is right. So let's go one at a time, right? So if we take those 3, the first one being nutrition, right? You and I have experimented on different diets and maybe trends, intermittent fasting, or trying to eat gluten-free for a month, or trying
the whole 30.
The whole 30, right? We're going to eat grass-fed beef, right? So we've experimented with different things, but any of those we haven't done forever, right? We're not still doing that on a day-to-day basis. Over time, I've become much more of a nutrition agnostic. So I don't think there's any set diet that's good for, like one diet that's good for everyone, right? But what you do notice is that most diets that work, they have a lot of things that are similar. And what are those things? Well, they try to get you to move away from processed foods and more towards whole, natural foods.
And just for our listeners, can you be really specific?
Yeah, so like let's go on a spectrum, and on one end is Skittles. I just pick Skittles because that's the candy that I used to like. And then on the other end, all the way at the other end is broccoli and steamed fish, right? We can't really be at broccoli and steamed fish forever. And you can't really be at Skittles forever. I think most people are kind of trying to move towards steamed vegetables and fish, and they know that that's healthier than Skittles, Does that make sense? So like any diet is going to be trying to move you away from processed foods, Skittles in this case, and towards natural foods, the vegetables, right? In this case, but the specifics depend on how what that means for you. Like, what is your macronutrient breakdown? Macronutrients being proteins, carbs, and fats. What's that going to be? It depends. Everyone's going to be different. But if you're getting your carbohydrates from a box, like cereal, instinctively that buying a sweet potato and boiling that or baking it is better than a carbohydrate that comes in a box. And you also know that if you go and get a chicken McNugget, that's not going to be as good as you going and buying a whole chicken and boiling it down and having a chicken soup, right? Or pick your fat, your vegetable oil that's mainly chemicals, or your whole butter, like you like Kerry's Gold butter. So I mean, if anyone can look at that and ask themselves, okay, which one is better? They're going to know if you have those two side by side.
Right. I just meant very simply, like, processed, meaning things that come in maybe a box or that have been not grown, like not just like that look like it just came out of the earth, or like a whole food. When we say whole food, it's pretty much just either an animal or a vegetable. Or
you know what? Another way to look at it is anything that you get where you look at the ingredients list and it's just a couple of things, one or two things, is going to be better than when you look at the ingredient list and there's 20 things and you can't pronounce half of them. So where you see a list of 10 different things that you can't pronounce, and takes you back to chemistry, high school chemistry class, and then you compare that to, again, I'll go back to like a potato, and you look and it says ingredient potato, right? You know that's a more whole natural food as opposed to a processed food.
Or even better, if there's no ingredient list because you're actually holding a potato, then you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, exactly the point. So this goes back to, again, us and becoming this kind of nutrition agnostic and not saying, listen, there's no right or wrong diet. All I'm saying is that almost all diets say, hey, you know what, why don't you move a little bit away from the processed foods and more towards whole natural foods. And then in addition to that, you can eliminate some nutritional deficiencies that way. So like a lot of people are lacking in even just drinking more water. Like there's a client of mine who came in, and the first thing we started working on is just drinking water. She was hospitalized twice for being dehydrated, right? And no change in diet at all. Just started, hey, drink as much water as you can, and just felt so much better after a week or two of just doing that. So move towards more natural foods, eliminate some of the nutritional deficiencies, which could be just dehydration. It could be some vitamins and minerals that you can get with a multivitamin. It could be not getting enough of the right types of fats, which you can get with, fish oil. And then after you're doing that and doing the basics well, then you can start tweaking stuff. But as long as you realize that all of those diets that you're following, that you're tweaking, and you're saying, well, now I'm ketogenic, that it's all just made up, like BS, really. Like we didn't evolve saying, in the Paleolithic era, saying, well, I'm a ketogenic diet. No, you just ate what was around, right?
No, whatever you could kill.
Yeah, whatever you could kill.
No, I mean, I think ultimately most everybody kind of knows what is good and what is quote unquote bad, right? And it's up to them to actually be honest with themselves. And I think it's a little bit of a hard truth and a little brutal honesty of going, well, you know what? I ate this. It made me feel bad. Probably not so good for me. I think your body also tells you too. I mean, when we, have our bad eating day, or I crave for something that I want to eat, like a pizza, I'll feel it later. Like my body will pretty much reject it. So I think the best thing is, like you said, kind of just use your brain and look at the spectrum. And it doesn't have to be perfect every day. Broccoli and fish is not realistic for all your meals and happiness, but also eating Skittles all day every day is not going to work out either.
But it comes back to, again, okay, so we're talking about how can you realistically incorporate that, right? Because the truth is the truth, and we all know it. So to your point, and to both of our points, right? It's like we know what the right thing to do is, but just because you know what the right thing to do is doesn't mean you're going to do it. So then how do we realistically implement this in a way that works and that sticks in the long term? And I just find that the best way to do that is by trying to incorporate small habits over time, and then that just becomes what your normal is. So if you know, hey, eating whole natural foods is better than eating processed foods. Okay, that's great, but what is that going to do for me? Well, then, you know what? Before even trying to change anything that you eat, why don't you start by paying attention to when you're eating? So that's like one of the first skills that I work with my clients is you don't have to change anything that you're eating. But how about this? How about if you take 5 to 10 minutes to eat dinner, just slow down and pay attention to what you're putting in your mouth, right? And then the next step after that is start paying attention to how you feel after you eat. And then we can start building on, all right, you know what? So now you're paying attention to what you're eating and you've started slowing down. How about you start experimenting with listening to your hunger cues and to your satiety cues? So you can say, you know what? I feel that I'm just about right full. Normally I would keep eating because I haven't paid attention, but now I'm paying attention. I'm going to start slowing down. If you build those two skills, then we can start introducing, hey, how about now, instead of that cardboard carbohydrate, let's introduce a whole natural thing. Not in every meal, maybe just once or twice a week. And then you can start adding lean protein, and then you can start adding vegetables, then you can start adding natural fats, right? And this is a process that takes a little bit of time, but if you commit to doing that, then you would build the skills that equal eating correctly, eating healthily. And it's not really work, it's just the way that we do it. Like the way that you and I eat, we just eat healthy food. And it's not really a big effort it's just the way that we eat. And that we've done it because we've been practicing the same habits, right, for a long time.
Yeah, so the thing I found really interesting there is you recognized or you defined certain patterns as skills. And I think to our, kind of just to somebody listening would be like, wait, a skill is eating slowly, or a skill
Absolutely.
is listening to, right? And so, well, obviously you and I know that because this is something that we've been practicing and implementing with our clients, but I think it's recognized, for people. And I don't want to spend too long on nutrition because we have the two other areas to get to, but it's probably just not as recognized that people need to build an actual skill of recognizing what I'm eating, or slowing down, or chewing more, or whatever the case may be. Like, I think people take eating and the reason it's so hard for people to control their eating, it's just eating gets emotional but I feel like, this definitely is one of the best and proven ways to control your intake is to build these skills. And it takes much longer than a crash diet where you sit down and you say, I'm going to do this for 20, 30 days, and you do lose all this weight, but I guarantee that's just such a high percentage really always gains it back. And this is really, I think, for me anyway, has been the only way that I've been able to kind of maintain something, be happy, eat what I want when I want, but then always kind of stay in my baseline. It's been the best way for maintenance.
Well, the big thing there is emotional, right? There's definitely a huge emotional component with food. Food is comforting and it feels good when you eat something that you really love, right? That doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing for you. But when it comes to food, I find that it helps that for you not to define it as, hey, this is good or bad, right? You can if you want, but it might be a better option to say, this is getting me towards my goals or getting me away from my goals. And not judging like, oh, I've been bad and I ate this bad thing. It could be just, you know what? I had a shitty day and I'm going to have my cookie and I really enjoyed my cookie and it made me feel better. And tomorrow when I wake up, maybe I'm not going to be at 100%, but I'm okay with that because I decided to do it. But tomorrow I'm not going to have a cookie because I'm going to try to, have a better day for whatever reason. But there's not really necessarily a good or bad. It's just the things that you do move you away and move you towards your goal. And that's why we define those things as skills, right? Because you need to build the skills over time that then become habits that then allow you to just you're almost on autopilot, right? You go into the restaurant and you order your food, and even if it's a burger, you're like, you know what? I'm going to have the burger, but I'm not going to have the bun because that's just what I do. I'm only going to have half the bun. And all of these fries, I don't need to eat all them fries. I'm not going to deny myself. I like a fry or two, but I'm not going to eat them all. And those are the type of things that you build over time, and they become second nature, and you just know how to deal with, all these types of different situations.
Yeah, there's something really key in that I believe that you said is because when people sit down with me to eat and we go out or something, and then I decide I'm not going to eat XYZ or I'm going to substitute this for that. And like you said, I love French fries. It's one of my favorite foods. That's why I bought an air fryer so I can make my own and try to make it a tad bit healthier, but I still can't eat that every day, right? But then what I get is, oh, you're so disciplined. And to me, yes, I can be disciplined in many areas, right? But when I'm making that decision, to me, it's not because I'm disciplined. It's really just because I'm like, well, I know how I'll feel. Like my brain in a matter of a few seconds just went through this whole, well, I know I'm going to feel really bad later. I have to teach class. There's no way I can eat like this. And I feel like I'm going to be okay. I don't feel like I'll be deprived. And like, there's like that whole process that happens in seconds, but it's because of like years of that skill development that you just mentioned. So it definitely doesn't happen overnight, and it definitely is a skill that you've had to develop. And it's not about like depriving yourself or being just so ultra disciplined and like, oh, I just kind of stay away from things that I don't like. It's really much more of a skill that's been developed, and then you just implement it. And I think that's really a really amazing thing that you've been able to do for people. And so, listeners, very quickly, the first couple of things we talked about, one is eating to 80% full, and then the second would be?
Eating 80% full is one, and I think that would go hand in hand with eating slowly. So if it were the order, I would say first, pay attention to what you eat, and an easy way to pay attention to what you eat is by eating slowly. And then you can really then tap into, and 80% is an arbitrary number for maybe some people who are just really anal or like, well, I ate it till I was 82% full. Oh man, this is crazy, right? Just, you could think of it like Goldilocks, right? It's not too much, not too little, it's just right. You just kind of know for you, this has been just right. But you can't do that if you're not paying attention to what you eat. So paying attention to what you eat, the first step is eating slowly. And then maybe you need some more like little micro skills in there, which means not eating while watching TV. Maybe you need to put the fork down in between bites, maybe have a conversation, right? There's a ton of like little sub micro skills that go under the umbrella of mastery of awareness, right? And paying attention to what you eat. And that's why, again, we keep going back to that word skills. But we can kind of wrap up the nutrition thing with this last thing, which is with the numbers, right? Is you can find a way that eating the right way for you is, right? Not good or bad, but what you know is going to get whatever eating means to you that gets you towards your goals. You can find a number, maybe 80% of the time that's what you eat, and 20% of the time you do whatever you want. I think that's kind of where we're at now. Now, if you've got pretty specific goals of I need to lose certain weight by a certain amount of time, you may need to eat really disciplined 90% of the time or 95% of the time. But after you've kind of met a certain baseline, then what you can do is just 80% of the time, do the things you know that work, and 20% of the time, enjoy yourself.
Yeah, perfect. And so for those of you, though, who are listening going, oh, that's easy, I can do that. I challenge you to, at your next meal, do those things that Oscar suggested. And I'd love to actually hear some feedback on how that goes. And if it was really super easy, or you go, oh, I already do that. Congrats, great to you. But for some of you, there is no shame in saying, wow, that was really difficult, or it didn't feel very natural. I'm having a hard time. And my advice to you would be actually to go ahead and reach out to Oscar. He also does remote training and coaching, and this is why a lot of people need trainers, because they kind of need someone to help hold them accountable. So, that's kind of what one of his function is. But, today we wanted to give you a bunch of, free advice so that you could kind of take it and run with it and hopefully meet your New Year's resolution. We definitely aren't trying to look down upon the New Year's resolution, but at the same time, we want everyone to be really realistic and not being the statistic of, within the first few months having a 50% failure rate. We want you to be successful and succeed. So let's move on to the more what Oscar considers fun part, which is the strength and conditioning and fitness part. And some people say, well, you guys work out all the time, and that's why you're in shape.
Ha, ha, ha. So I think I worked out more when this wasn't my full-time job. But it goes down to, again, we kind of have, in the same way that we built a certain set of skills for the nutrition, and consistency of doing things a certain way, we also have a certain baseline of fitness that doesn't take a ton of work to keep up. I'm not saying it's easy. And sometimes we get a little bit of these valleys, peaks and valleys, and can get into a rut of like, oh, I haven't really been taking care of myself as much because I'm taking care of other people. But we definitely don't spend all day working out. You know, our job is helping other people. That's the first thing we do. And just like for our clients or our students, we have to then, on top of our job, take time for ourselves to work out, right? Or to train.
So what would you say, because this is what I hear all the time, and this actually goes into nutrition as well. Like, I don't have time to cook, or I don't have time to work out. I don't have time to exercise. You know, what is your response to those that tell you first that they want to do these goals, but then they tell you they don't have the time?
I've got two responses. Okay, which one do you want to hear first? The one that goes on in my head, or the one that I tell?
Honesty, always honesty.
Okay. So there are. I actually do have two responses. I mean, the first is it depends on the person if they can take it. I just to let them know that that's bullshit, right? No, there's no such thing as I don't have enough time, because we all have 24 hours in the day, right? That is the one equalizer. Everyone on this planet has the exact same amount of hours in the day, right? But it's just, what are we willing to prioritize our time with? So it goes back to, again, how there's not good or bad. With nutrition, there's not good or bad. With your fitness training, with your physical movement practice, there's not good or bad. There are just things that you do that move you towards your goal, and there's things that you do that move you away from your goal. And you just have to reconcile and be aware that this is what you're choosing to do. So let's just take our own example of things that happened last year kind of repetitively, like your sister got put in the hospital, you know, for certain complications. Our house was broken into. The holidays came up. And so a lot of things came into one right after another, right? In addition, we were still running our business. But if I look back at all those times and I tell myself, well, I didn't have time to do this or that, that's BS, because I still had time. It's just that instead of putting my time towards exercise or eating perfectly, I decided knowingly, you know what, I'm going to spend a little bit of time with Mimi and watch a TV show, because we need to kind of just decompress and enjoy ourselves a little bit, right? And it's the same with everyone else. Anyone who says that they don't have time, they just need to realize that they are making the conscious choice to prioritize and put their time somewhere else. And maybe that time means that they're going to go on Facebook and look at some stuff that makes them laugh, and maybe that's exactly what they need to make them feel better at that point, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you're choosing to do that as opposed to something else, right? No one is forcing us to do anything yet. Right? We're not there yet. No one's like, we're not at that point where people are telling us exactly what you need or don't need to do. So when I started Control Your Health and we, you and I kind of came up with that name and started thinking about it, we realized that it's not really about like control, it's more about self-awareness. So the first step with anything is just that you're self-aware and that you realize that the actions that you take or whatever's happening, that you're pretty much responsible for all of it, right? So anyway, that's my response for I don't have time in my mind and sometimes with someone else. And then the other thing is sometimes then saying, well, let's talk about what goes on in a typical day for you. And then maybe they can find that time on their own.
Okay.
That's a nicer way to do it.
Which is the way that usually ends up happening, because you're actually a pretty nice guy.
True.
All right. I do want to talk about the Control Your Health and the symbol and what it means and why. But before we do that, I did want to go a little bit more into the fitness, because the Control Your Health part actually does go into a little bit of that mind, body awareness and that spirituality and just like having everything kind of meld together, getting proper sleep and mindfulness. But in terms of fitness, most of us don't actually love exercise. I mean, even me as a trainer, as a martial artist, I do love Kung Fu, of course, but I mean, it's not that, I want to go to the gym and swing my kettlebells. I'm like, oh, I love this. This is so much fun. I mean, it's just as difficult for me to get up and do a routine than anyone else. But what would you say to someone that's just like, look, I have never worked out ever, or it's been 30 years. I'm probably just going to injure myself. I don't have money to go to a trainer. I don't have money to go to the gym. What can I do at home to get a little bit of movement? Or what would be your suggestion to kind of what I think the majority is? Majority of people who are busy, but they maybe need a little win. They maybe need a little snippet to kind of get them started on it. And maybe I feel like it's contagious. Like once you start to work out, and the endorphins and just all the stuff that happens scientifically are actually there. But it is like once you start to do something good, that becomes contagious. Like positivity is contagious. So what would you say is a good thing for them to get started in terms of working out and exercise?
Okay. And this goes for everybody. This is actually a real good question. I'm trying to think of how to phrase it the best way, because I really feel strongly about it, is that in the short term, or what you do on a day-to-day basis, really lower your expectations. I mean, really lower them. And then in the long term and in the big picture, make it as big and audacious as possible. So what does that mean? If you want to get a little bit of a win, and let's just assume that you're a hygienic person and that you brush your teeth every day and take a shower every day. If you were to commit to there's a guy, and I apologize, I don't know the name, but if you look up tinyhabits.com, there's a guy who came up with this idea. And he says, if you're about to go and take a shower, and can you commit to one push-up right before you jump in the shower? And then, I've told that to a client. They're like, well, of course I can do that. I was like, well, let's start there, right? And you give yourself, to use your words, that little tiny win, right? If you tell yourself, hey, I'm going to do this, and then you do it, nothing feels better than that. Like, think about the last time you did a checklist. You're the wrong person maybe to ask this, because you do this all the time.
I was just going to say, checking off my checklist is the best.
But for me, I've made a lot of checklists that never get checked off. But nothing feels better than when you make a checklist and you check it off. So if you really lower your expectation, and let's say you don't have any movement, and you're a guy, right? So we'll use a push-up for a guy, or maybe it's a squat, like a bodyweight squat. And you were to say, you know what? When I wake up and I jump in the shower, before I jump in the shower, I'm going to do one push-up, and I'm going to do that every single day. And you just build that habit, and that one push-up or one squat will build into 2 or 5 or 10. Then that will, over time, you would be astounded of the changes you could make in the course of a year, because remember, we're talking long term, by really lowering your expectations on a day-to-day basis, right? And I think that's the fault that mostly, going back to New Year's resolutions and where we started with this conversation, is making these crazy goals that they think need to be implemented to the extreme completely right off the bat. But if you can look at your daily schedule, and especially those people who say they don't have time. If you tell me you don't have time to do one push-up, get out of my face. I mean, get out of here, right? You're ridiculous. Get out of here, man. But if you can start there with really lowering your expectations of what you're committing to do, but then commit to doing that consistently, then that's it. That is, I think, the biggest secret, right? Whatever the goal is, we're talking about physical fitness, but that goes with anything else. If you can just commit to, I'm going to lower my expectations. I'm not going to do a 45-minute workout tomorrow. I'm going to wake up, I'm going to get out of bed, I'm going to do one push-up, I'm going to do one squat, and then I'm going to brush my teeth, then I'm going to get in my car, and then I'm going to pat myself on the back for doing what I said I was going to do. And like carry that over then to the next day. And continue, keeping those expectations low on a day-to-day basis, but with a long-term goal.
That actually is quite a good idea. And actually the person for Tiny Habits is Dr. BJ Fogg.
That's it, so, BJ Fogg. And I got to give credit to like the guy who I consider a guru, which is Dan John, the strength coach. He's got this amazing blog post where that's where I read that. I just didn't remember the name of the Tiny Habits. But if you want kind of this just very layman's term, no nonsense, you can look up Dan John. He's got books. I mean, he puts things into a perspective which I basically just steal his stuff. Like I read it and I go, oh, this is awesome. I write it down. I tell a client this and they're like, wow, you're really smart.
Yeah, but you always quote and let them know. But I mean, but that's part of passing on knowledge. And I think, all these guys that, say these prolific things, it's probably nothing new. It's just sometimes different people hear and messages are conveyed differently, so like different people respond differently to how they hear things, so sometimes it'll click with one person, not the other. But I will also link that. I'll link Dan John and Dr. BJ Fogg in here so that you can kind of nutrition. And Precision Nutrition, of course. I'll link all of those things so that you can kind of get that. But to your point of the tiny habits, that actually has actually worked for me, because my thing, yes, is I check things off on my list, but to no avail. Like I think go the reverse, where I on a daily basis don't lower the expectation. I actually up it too much. So this is the best advice you could possibly give me, is less check boxes, because I'll tell you what, I will like not sleep, not eat, neglect everything to get those check boxes done. And so then what I've done is, maybe I had, all these, trying to have perfect nutrition and fitness and all this stuff, but it all goes out the window the one day I don't get to sleep at all. Like, the lack of sleep, it leads to so much strife and stress and anxiety, and just like your whole body. I mean, I don't know what the sleep study is, but it is a horrible thing when you don't get sleep, and that tied into like stress and whatnot. And so I was trying to do some meditation or some mindfulness. In Kung Fu, we do Bai Foot Sao, which is a breathing exercise. I've podcasted about that as well. And I used to try to go, okay, let me try to do like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of meditation. You hear these people meditating for 45 minutes. And then someone said to me, just do 1 minute. Just do 1 minute a day. And if you don't have 1 minute a day, you're full of shit. Just like what you just said. It's BS, right? You don't. You've just chosen to do something else, and you have to be okay with that. But I mean, that habit, when I was really vigilant, it ended up building up where I was able to go a little bit longer and make the time for it. And I always felt better when I carved the time out for myself. So I definitely agree with you on that. And so moving into that mindfulness and, that mind-body connection with sleep, and what kind of advice do you have for us in that arena? And how does that tie into your control your health?
So, yeah, the mindset part is probably the most important, because everything goes all to hell if you're really stressed out, right? Like the type of person that you really are is when things are really stressful, and you're not going to be able to do really elaborate plans when you're super stressed out. You're going to revert to your programming. And so if we take it back to how we talked about building skills, this is why it's so important to build those skills, and they become part of just your daily routine, because then when you have your worst day, you still have those skills, right? You're not stressing and trying to think, well, no, my special super diet, Superman diet told me that I need to eat this specific thing at this time, but I can't process that now because I'm too stressed. But if you have the skill of like, what I normally do is just eat slowly and eat until I'm about 80% full, then it doesn't matter if you have to stop at McDonald's, right? You can still eat slow and eat to 80% full and still be mindful of what you're eating. So the mindset is really important. Meditation is amazing. I've done it sporadically. I would not say that that's something that I've done consistently, but in the same advice that a friend of yours gave is not to think, and I guess that I just gave myself, which is not to think, well, I've got to do 20 minutes of meditation. And then maybe you wake up a little bit later because you slept too late, or you didn't eat right, or you're just tired. And then you wake up and you realize, well, I don't have 20 minutes, forget it, I'm not going to do it, right? Lower your expectation even with that, so you can do a minute of breathing. And if you don't have a minute because you really are rushing, just try to pause for 1 second and take one deep breath, where you're really paying attention to that inhale and exhale. For people who are type A personalities,
I don't know anybody like that.
Some people feel that meditation is like, it's kind of like a little bit too woo-woo. That's not my style. But you don't have to think of it as a meditative practice. You could just think of it as recovery. And just in the same way that you've got your cell phone, that we all have these cell phones connected to our hips and they need to be recharged, your body needs to be recharged, even if it's just for a minute. So probably one of the best things, the first advice that we do in Kung Fu, at Wallam Kung Fu, at Tai Chi, at Control Your Health, is what's the first thing we teach is take a deep breath, how to breathe. Take a nice deep breath. Send to yourself. Pay attention to how you're breathing. Where are you feeling stressed out? Relax. And then that transitions into everything else. So that's the mindset part. And then as far as the control your health, like I mentioned already, it goes much more into control because you can't really control your thoughts, but you can be aware of what you're thinking. And you can be aware of like, oh, these are just thoughts that I'm having, right? We can get into probably a lot more deeper into that. But the really cool part with the control your health, the sign that I asked your father if we can use is that it is this upside down fire sign.
In Chinese. In
Chinese. So the sign for fire is this really cool character. And in specifically for Wallam Kung Fu, in the village that your father's from, that style of Kung Fu, what they did is they took the fire sign and they flipped it over, and it means control. The fire sign upside down means control. Because if you can control that inner fire, then you can control everything else, right?
Yeah, that patience, control.
There's so much layers into that, and what's really cool is that once I started working with that, with Control Your Health, then I just found it everywhere. Anytime I hear the word control, my ears perk up, and I'm listening to what someone says, and I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And so that same, you can carry that over to whatever. Like if you say, well, you know what, I'm the type of person who meditates, takes deep breaths, then you're going to find a way to do it, right?
Absolutely. And I think, and a lot of people have asked about your fire sign upside down and the symbol and your whole logo. They find it really fascinating. And yes, we are very grateful to my father and to the Shajiang village for allowing us to use that, because of course it is very specific to his village, and other people have not asked permission to use it. So we try to be honorable in such things.
Yeah, we won't mention any names, but I mean, listen, probably the people who steal stuff from Wallam, are not listening to your podcast, I'm assuming, right?
Or they are trying to steal stuff. And our listeners are going, I thought this was about New Year's resolutions. Well, my New Year's resolution is to just do better. But we did mention a couple things in this podcast that I did want to mention. If you haven't listened back to last year's episodes, please do. I had some incredible guests, and you can just kind of pick, choose, and refuse and go through and look. But I also did kind of a little bit of a wrap up to around the holidays, and a little bit of that mindfulness and what I was grateful for, my Christmas wish list. And Oscar just mentioned that we did have a little bit of a rough end of the year with Tina, my sister, being in the hospital, and then also my house got broken into while I was in the house. But if you want to hear on how that went and how my control and my fire was maybe not upside down right away, but how I was able to kind of recover from that and how that episode went, you can listen back to that episode, and I will link that here for you as well. And any final advice, Oscar, for our New Year's resolutioners?
I was thinking about that. So if we take into account that, okay, we're talking about New Year's resolutions, and it has to do with health and fitness, and we discussed three major things, right? Nutrition, some kind of movement practice, and maybe mindset, right? How could you incorporate that in a way that works? And go back to even how I said earlier, lower your expectations. How about you just try this for January, okay? Really low expectations, okay? You wake up, you stand up, touch your toes, and squat. You don't focus on anything else except for taking one big breath, inhale and exhale. And then you drink a big glass of water. That's it. We've covered moving, breathing, and eliminating some deficiencies like dehydration.
And you can actually find that on his Instagram post. He's going to do a little clip for you, and you can follow along and move, breathe, and drink water with Coach Oscar from Control Your Health. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I hope all of you do stick to your New Year's resolutions. And if you don't have any, that's okay too. Like Oscar said, it's a day-to-day reset. So we will catch you guys next time. Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you, Mimi.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Culture Chat, and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please support my podcast by becoming a patron. For as little as $1 per month, you can help me keep the show on air. Just go to www.culturechatpodcast.com to donate or send me suggestions. Please also follow me on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.